Hi, I'm Jerry Sandusky, voice of the Baltimore Ravens.
Touchdown, Ravens!
And you're listening to the Extra Point Show.
Welcome into the Extra Point Show, everybody. I'm Vasilios. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Ravens had a tough loss at home against the Detroit Lions earlier this week, and it's not going to get any easier as they head to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs at 4:25 Eastern on Sunday. To help me break down this game today, Carrington Harrison, who hosts afternoons in Kansas City for Infinity Sports Network, if I'm not mistaken. Carrington, how are you today, brother?
Doing pretty good, man. Happy to be on your podcast today.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you taking the time. And look, both of these teams are walking a pretty similar path here. Both had kind of a disappointing start to the season. What's it looking like on the Chiefs side of things, especially after getting their first dub last week against New York?
Yeah, man, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I would say that these two teams are almost in the exact same spot right now at 1-2. The winner is going to be 2-2 heading into October. The loser is going to be 1-3 and really have to dig themselves out of a hole. Something we talked a lot about on my radio show this week was, who needs this game more? I think it means a little bit more for Kansas City, but I'm sure we'll talk about that as this conversation progresses. To kind of answer your question about how we got to 1-2, though, with Kansas City, a lot of it has just been missed opportunities in the fourth quarter. I would also say injuries. Right now, the Chiefs, at least in their first three games, they don't have Rashee Rice, who won't be back until week 7 because of the suspension. They also lost Xavier Worthy on the first offensive possession of the season. So, if you take the number 1 and number 2 receiver off any team in the NFL, their offense is going to struggle. So I would say that an offense that has really stalled and is ranked 21st right now is a reason on why the Chiefs have gotten here. It's also just been lack of execution in the fourth quarter. The Chiefs to kind of be that team that makes that play late in games. At least that's what they've been during this Patrick Mahomes era. In week 1, there was a 3rd and 12, and Justin Herbert converted it to basically run out the clock. In week 2, the Chiefs are putting together a 14-play drive. Travis Kelce bobbles a ball. It ends up getting intercepted. The Eagles then score on that possession. So you're thinking 7 points for Kansas City that would have gave them the 17-13 lead. Then you flip it to the other side. The Eagles get the interception. They score. It's now 20-10, and this Chiefs offense just isn't built to kind of overcome 2-score deficits. So that's where the Chiefs have really kind of slipped up so far this year, and that's how they find themselves at 1-2.
Now, obviously, the Ravens have had it a little bit tougher than the Chiefs have this season. At least those losses have come a little bit more painful in a way, right? And we saw in week 1, Derrick Henry fumbled away the game, and that led to Buffalo getting the dub. And then coming back a week later, beating the Browns and Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, it's way past his time. He's still doing great things out there, but not great enough to beat the Ravens. And then last week against the Lions, that's just they just got out coached, outplayed, everything on Monday Night Football at home. And so what do you expect to have to deal with from this Ravens team? I mean, Steve Spagnuolo is no stranger to taking on Lamar Jackson at any location. How do you feel like the Chiefs defense is ready to take on this stumbling Ravens offense that allowed their star quarterback to get sacked 7 times and pressured 30 last week?
Yeah, that's interesting. You call them stumbling. I mean, they scored 40 points against the Bills and they scored 30 points against the Lions. I still look at this offense as being one of the 5 best in the National Football League. I mean, it starts with their rush attack. You have maybe the best mobile quarterback in the history of the NFL in Lamar Jackson. And when he decides to hand it off, he then hands it off to a future Hall of Fame running back in Derrick Henry. So you just know they're going to be really difficult to deal with. And they just put pressure on you from the outside. So, I mean, that's what I'm worried about in this game. I think there's only really one way for the Chiefs to win this game. I think they need to win it in kind of a low-scoring kind of rock fight. If this turns into a shootout like has happened in the Ravens game so far, I mean, they scored 41 points against the Browns. We mentioned the scores against the Lions and the Bills. If this turns into a game in which the Ravens scored 35, 40 points, I just don't think the Chiefs have enough offensive firepower to keep up with the Ravens. If the Chiefs defense can limit Lamar, limit the run game, and contain the weapons on the outside, and this game is a 24 kind of game, that's a game that I think Kansas City can win.
And I mean, you raised some great points, and I know they have scored a lot to start this season, but when your guy is getting hit in the backfield as much as he is and hurried as much as he is, the fact that they were still able to score that many points on the Lions is pretty impressive. But I will say that score was not as close, or the game was not as close as that final score indicated. It just in watching that, that last touchdown to Mark Andrews kind of made it a lot closer than it should have been. But however, how do you think that the Chiefs' rushing attack is going to look with Pacheco taking the carries that he's going to get? Because looking at the Ravens' defense over the last few weeks, they haven't played very well. Against the Browns, they allowed the Browns rushed for more yards than the Ravens did, and then last week we saw the Lions go for over 200 with the combination of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's the first time in probably 8 years the Ravens have been outrushed in back-to-back games, and been held to under, I don't know, 100 yards. So since Lamar Jackson took over, so what does this look like for the Chiefs' rush attack against this Ravens defense?
I'm here telling you that if the Chiefs outrush the Baltimore Ravens, you guys got some serious problems, because the Chiefs have one of the 5 worst rushing attacks in the National Football League. Patrick Mahomes is their leading rusher. I think you watched enough Chiefs games to know that's not when the Chiefs are at their best. Mahomes is going to be leading this team in rushes and rush yards, and he's really been the only reason that they've gotten explosive plays in the run game. One thing that I found interesting, just talking to Ravens people throughout the week and just kind of listening to, what the other side thinks, is you guys kind of view your defense like the Cowboys. We saw the Cowboys let Russell Wilson throw for 450 yards and Caleb Williams cooked them last week. I look at the Ravens, we're like, yeah, you got, the Lions scored and the Bills scored. They're going to do that to a lot of teams this year. So, I kind of feel like these two defenses are in the same spot, too. The Chiefs didn't really do a good job against the Chargers in week 1 defensively. I mean, Herbert played maybe his best game of his career against this defense. Now, they did a good job against Jalen Hurts, but I think we all know the Eagles are a great team. They're not a great passing offense now. And they played the Giants last week, and the Giants they fired their quarterback immediately after the game. So I think both defenses kind of have to answer a test going up a real formidable foe. And I don't want to overreact too much about the Ravens defense. I thought it was going to be good. I imagine you also thought it was going to be good at the beginning of the season. Now, if this Kansas City offense scores 35 points against them, I'm ready to have some conversations, because Kansas City hasn't been able to do that to anybody so far this year. I mean, they scored 6 points in the first half against the Giants last week. They really only put together one really, really good drive against that Giants team. They can't really run the football effectively, whether it's been Pacheco, whether it's been Kareem Hunt. They just don't have any explosiveness in the run game. So if this game turns out to be a shootout because both defenses aren't capable, that's going to tell me a lot, certainly about the Ravens defense.
Yeah, and in looking at the injury report for the Ravens, you have Travis Jones, who's a defensive tackle. He is questionable. He was limited both Thursday and Friday in practice. Nnamdi Madubuike, their big money star defensive tackle, he's out already, got announced 3 days ago. Kyle Van Noy limited on Friday and didn't practice up until Friday. He's questionable. And Broderick Washington, another defensive lineman, has already been ruled out. So these are just things it's the young guys have to take over and do these things for the Ravens defensive front. And is that just something that the Chiefs could realistically take advantage of, is just relative inexperience on the defensive line of the Ravens?
I mean, we're going to see. I mean, I got questions about the Ravens on both the offensive and defensive side of the football. at least when it comes to the line of scrimmage, I'm not super confident. I'll just go back to my main point. If Kansas City on the ball effectively on the Ravens, and you guys got some problems because they haven't been able to run the football effectively against anybody. Isaiah Pacheco's averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Kareem Hunt is averaging 3.6 yards per carry. If they're slicing and dicing that Ravens defensive line, it's hard to – and I've been thinking this too, and it goes in line with what we've been talking about. I'm not going to count out the Ravens, right? Like, you got Lamar Jackson, you got John Harbaugh, you're a very talented team, but you're going to have to explain to me how the Ravens are a Super Bowl contender if they spent all September losing to Super Bowl contenders. You lost to the Lions, you lost to the Bills. In this scenario, you lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, why am I putting you in this conversation with those teams if on the field couldn't beat any of those teams? Yeah. So that's just going to be an interesting talking point. I mean, for both sides. I mean, whichever team starts 1-3, and that's the talking point on Monday on the national TV shows. That's just going to be interesting. Like, how are we looking at them? Are people counting them out for the postseason? Can they turn things around in their division? What happens with the Steelers in that early morning game? Do the Steelers win? The Ravens lose? So now they're 2 games back of the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into October. I say this a lot in baseball, and it, applies to the NFL too. You can't make the playoffs in April, but you can certainly miss the playoffs in April. Like, getting off to a slow start, you can spend the rest of the baseball season just trying to make up for the slow start. You can't make the playoffs in October. Like, no one thinks that the Colts are in the postseason, but we certainly have already eliminated teams from the postseason in September. So I'm not going to count either one of these teams out, but, a team in you guys' division with the Cincinnati Bengals, the last couple of years, they start off really slow in the month of September, and then you basically spend all of October and November trying to get back even for how slow of a start you created for yourself.
You raise a really great point, and as someone who lives in Baltimore and there's an Orioles flag right here, I had to watch this team get off to a really slow start and play well towards the end of the year, and it's painful. They did miss the playoffs in April. So, and look, when it comes to the Ravens, I'm a fan. I try to be as unbiased as possible, especially when it comes to this, because I like hearing the other side, because it brings me back down to earth a little bit. But if the Chiefs in this scenario, if the Chiefs do make the Ravens defenders look silly, there has to be a move made, right? There's been a lot of whispers around already about Zach Orr possibly being the scapegoat for this season. Third year guy, as a defensive coordinator. They had to bring in Chuck Pagano this year to kind of help him out on the defensive side. What do you think? Do you think that the Ravens, if they lose this game, do they make a move of any kind?
Yeah, I mean, probably so. I mean, there has to be a sense of urgency for you, like, you're kind of in that window right now where it's kind of now or never. And I mean, the Ravens, they were controlling the game for Buffalo for the first 35 minutes of the game. I imagine even if the Chiefs win this game, you watched enough Chiefs games, I've watched enough Chiefs games, it's going to be close in the final 8 minutes of the game. Every Kansas City game is close in the final 8 minutes of it. So it's not like the Ravens are super far off. But, what I hate when fans do, and we all do this, man, if you change this one play, well, yeah, that's how you lose games. The other team makes 1 or 2 more plays than you, and that's how you end up on the wrong side of it. I'm a big believer that football games are defined by 5 to 8 plays that happen. And over the course of the game, like, you'll know them in this game. It'll be a 3rd and 3, and the Ravens throw an incompletion, and they're forced to punt. Man, that's a big swing of momentum in the game, where if you convert that, you likely go down the field and get points. You'll feel it in the tug and pull. Think back to the AFC Championship game a couple years ago in these teams. Zay Flowers is diving into the end zone. If you hold on to that and score a touchdown, who knows how the game turns around? Chiefs force a fumble that immediately takes points off of the board, and the Ravens end up losing the game. That's how close games have been between all 3 of these teams: Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore.
Now, back to the Chiefs side of things. Is this, and I hate to be just like hyperbolic here, but is this the most adversity that we've seen Patrick Mahomes face so far? I know. Look, we're heading into week 4. I hate to drop this right here, but is this the most adversity Patrick Mahomes has faced in his career so far?
That's a good question, actually. Nobody's asked me that this week. I would say no. In the first Super Bowl run, the Chiefs were 6-4. The Chiefs had a month in October that year where I mean, everything could go wrong. They went 1-3 in the month of October. If you remember, this is actually the last time that the Chiefs did a quarterback sneak with Patrick Mahomes. He dislocated his knee in that game. So they had a terrible October. Mahomes is hurt. They're a 500-ish team. Mahomes comes back against the game against the Titans. Their offense is just a little bit off, but you tell, no, Mahomes is healthy enough. They end up losing a road game that season to the Tennessee Titans, and they didn't lose again the rest of the season. They just went undefeated the rest of the way and won the Super Bowl. I would say that that's probably the most adversity that they faced. I mean, this is definitely the most adversity they faced in a while. I mean, if you go back to the Super Bowl, they have lost 3 of their last 4 games. They got blown out in the Super Bowl, and then the 2 losses that they've had so far this season. So, I mean, this is only in one things of this is it. I just actually finished watching the Cowboys documentary not too long ago, and Michael Irvin was talking about that the road to a championship is rarely smooth. It has peaks and valleys, and it has bumps in the roads. You know, the Chiefs went through a stretch where they just won. You know, they won 11 straight one-score games. You know, every close game, like you guys last year in week 1, where Isaiah Likely's foot is just a hair out of bounds. You know, they just had an incredible string of winning those games. This year, they've lost those 2 games. So you have to think as Kansas City gets back healthy, they get Rashee Rice back in 3 weeks. Xavier Worthy's expected to play in this game. They've never had Worthy, Rice, and Hollywood Brown all healthy at the same time. So the belief is that that's going to happen here coming up in the middle of October. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely adversity now, but I think a lot of the conversation in Kansas City has been, this is the right time to get Kansas City. You don't want to see them in November when everybody gets healthy, and the Chiefs just start playing better football.
You know, Xavier Worthy coming back, that's going to be huge. Him and Tyquan Thornton and Hollywood Brown, all 3 of those guys are just burners. So the fact that Tyquan's been coming on as of late too, that's going to be huge. One last topic I want to hit on here is the fall from grace for Derrick Henry. And I hate to say fall from grace because he had a spectacular first game up until that fumble, but then he has yet to have more than 50 yards in back-to-back games. So, and he's fumbled in all 3 games so far. Is it something between the ears, or do you just think it's something mechanically that he's doing wrong?
Not ready to say that yet with Derrick Henry. I mean, he's the best running back of his era, best running back of his generation. I would vote for him as a first ballot Hall of Fame running back. Like, I think he's been incredible. Let's get a little bit more information. I think we all do this with teams. We do this with players, you know, and I get it. Like, every football game in a vacuum means so much. I'm not counting out a guy like Derrick Henry. Now, if we're having this conversation in the middle of October, I'll come back on and we can talk about the decline of Derrick Henry. Now, I will say this when it comes to running backs, and this probably goes to your point. Man, when it happens quick. You know, like, it's not like you see it coming. It just happens. It's kind of like an episode of The Sopranos. You know what I mean? Like, you'll like a character's like, damn, he died. You know, like, that's kind of how it happens, especially at running back. But, I mean, Derrick Henry's just been too good over the last 6 years for me to get overly concerned with just 2 poor games. You are right. I mean, he was incredible in week 1 against Buffalo. He just had the costly fumble that obviously turned the momentum of the game. So let's give it a couple more weeks with Derrick Henry before we sound.
Fair enough. All right. So last thing is, who do you like at 4:25 Eastern tomorrow? Do you like the Ravens or do you like the Chiefs?
I'm taking the Chiefs in this one. I think getting the Chiefs as home underdogs is just always the right side to be on. I didn't think about this until Tim Barbalace joined us on the show a couple of days ago. The Ravens are bigger favorites in Arrowhead than Philadelphia was in week 2. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Philadelphia is clearly better than Kansas City. Like, I don't think anybody would argue that. I don't know if the Chiefs could argue that right now. Like, that is a better football team than the Chiefs are. That game ended up as a pick'em at kickoff. The Ravens have been 2.5-point favorites basically since the line opened, and it's just never moved. I got the Chiefs at plus 130. I'll take the Chiefs as a home dog every single time. I guess for a football reason, I think the Chiefs have been real close in their first 2 games. They were real close in the game against the Chargers. They were real close in the game against Philadelphia. We talked about those one individual plays. I just think the pendulum swings back and forth, where I think the Chiefs, it was like the roulette table. You go to a roulette table and it keeps going red. Eventually, you know what black's going to come. And I just think that the Chiefs are too good of a team as a whole to keep kind of losing these one-score games. But I think what makes this game interesting is I think you guys can say that on the exact same side. Derrick Henry's too good to have these fumbles. This defense is not one of the bottom 5 in the National Football League. So I think there's a belief that the Ravens are also going to swing back toward the middle as well and start playing better football. And that's what makes this, to me, I would say outside of the Eagles and Bucks, the most interesting game this week in the NFL, aside from the Micah Parsons storyline of him going back to Dallas, because this game means so much for both sides. And I do think how we feel about each of these teams going into October is going to be drastically different depending on who wins or loses. If you start 2-2, you got about a 55% chance of making the postseason. If you start 1-3, you have a 13% chance of making the postseason. In Kansas City, that's just in a much more difficult division than the Ravens are in. The Chargers might be the second best team in the AFC. The Broncos, I still don't know how the Broncos lost to the Indianapolis Colts. Like, the Broncos should be a 2-1 football team. They've lost their 2 games on game-winning field goals so far this year. So the Broncos are good and competitive. The Chargers are good. And, the Raiders, I don't think they're a great team by any means, but the Raiders aren't going to win 4 or 5 games this year. Like, the Raiders are going to win 7 games, and they're going to be salty for anybody they go up against. So, you don't want to be in a situation if you're Kansas City where you're 2-4 when Rashee Rice gets back. The Chargers are potentially 6-0, Buffalo 6-0, and maybe the division race is a little bit out of your reach, and maybe that 1 seed is out of the reach as well. So I just think this game matters more for Kansas City. They're at home. I think these 2 teams are fairly even for the most part. I'm going to take Kansas City as the home dog.
I like it. All right, Carrington, I appreciate you joining. Why don't you let everybody know where they can find your stuff, where they can listen to you? Just tell them all of that.
Yeah, no, I host afternoons on 96.5, The Fan in Kansas City. I also work for Infinity Sports Network on Saturdays, and I work for Sirius XM on Sundays, man. So I'm always around, man, excited as football season, man. Happy to be on your podcast to break down this game, man. Hopefully we'll do this again in the postseason. Hopefully these 2 teams see each other in January.
Man, that's going to be something. I hope we do get to talk about something in January for both of these squads, though. Football is always better when these teams are good. Carrington, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the podcast today. I'm Vasilios. We'll catch you guys next week, hopefully, talking about a Ravens win.